Hand of the Day.
Hey guys, it's Alec, Torelli, and welcome back to the Hand of the Day. I'm taking your best hands from my Hello Alec series this week, and I selected one to feature for this week's Hand of the Day. This hand is Hello Alec number 54. It comes from my reader Daryl, who finds himself in a tough spot with 2 threes. I feel like Daryl, I love you, bro. You're a great reader. I'm really glad to have you as part of the community. But this hand, I feel like I got to be a little hard on you. I feel like we made a few mistakes pretty much on every street. So I selected this hand as a great learning experience for some ways to play pocket pairs, especially playing poker out of position. So the blinds are 2-5, under the gun min raise opens to 10, and second position 3 bets to $30. We find ourselves in the small blind with 2 threes. And I think here we have a pretty clear and easy fold. Everybody's 100 big blinds deep. We really don't have much room to recoup the 6 big blinds or more that we're calling pre-flop in the worst position possible. We have to always ask ourselves when we're calling pre-flop, especially with hands that are hoping to flop big, like sets, what percentage of the time are we gonna see the flop? You still have the big blind in the pot and the under the gun opener, who symbolized a lot of strength by raising under the gun. When we cold call here in the small blind, perhaps letting the big blind into the pot, you have to think that a lot of the times the under the gun player is going to 4-bet and force us to fold and protect his strong range that he opened with pre-flop. So I feel like calling $30 here is a pretty big waste of money, because a lot of the times we're not even going to be able to see the flop and realize our equity and bust someone with our small set. The other fact is that most of the time, pretty much all of the time that we do see the flop, we're pretty much only relying on hitting our set to recoup our investment. It's going to be very hard in a 3-way, perhaps 4-way pot to outplay our opponents out of position in a 3-bet pot. There's a very small stack to pot ratio. The pot's going to be pretty big, and we're pretty much just going to have to be guessing and bluffing our way to the promised land, not really knowing where we're at in the hand or trying to get our opponents to fold a massive hand on the flop. I don't really like that strategy, so I much prefer to just fold here pre-flop and wait for a better spot. That being said, we got to play the hand as it is. We went ahead and called. The big blind called and the under the gun called, so we go 4 ways to the flop. The flop comes Jack 8-7 rainbow. Pretty terrible flop for us. It's almost impossible that nobody hit this board, and it's really also pretty impossible that we're gonna just find a way to win the hand. We can't really check raise here profitably, so our only option is to check fold, and that's really why I didn't like calling pre-flop, just because we don't have any options unless we hit a set. We check, the flop gets checked around surprisingly, and we go 4 ways to the turn. The turn comes in offsuit 7, so now we decide to bet 85 into 120. I don't really know what we're doing here. I guess we could be betting with a jack, or we could somehow have a weird odd 7 in our hand, but the 7s that we're going to have are going to be 8-7 suited, which there's only 1 combo, or 7-6 suited, which there's 2 combos. I guess, of course, we could have something like 8s full or jacks full, but we're really not representing that much when we bet. I guess we could have an overpair like 2 queens that were a little tricky pre-flop, but the other side of the coin is that it's really hard for us to be bluffing here, so our opponent shouldn't really call us light. But all that aside, you have to think to yourself, am I going to get this bet through 6 other cards? Is everybody going to fold enough to justify bluffing on this turn? And if they do call the turn, can I bluff all in on the river and get them to fold? I think the answer to both those questions is no, and it's really risky and dangerous to bet here with so much action pre-flop and such a coordinated flop that I think betting here is just a little bit too ambitious. I don't think we're going to get folds often enough, and I think the times that we get called, we don't really know where we're at. We could be drawing dead in really bad shape, and our opponents could just be waiting to snap us off on the river. So I don't really like betting here, but we go ahead and bet 85. The big blind folds, the under the gun original raiser calls, and the 3-better folds. And we decide to check. At this point, if I was going to bet the turn, I would probably bet the river again, even though I don't really like it. I think I would try to get my opponent to fold something like Jack X, like Queen Jack, King Jack, Ace Jack suited, or 2 queens, or something like that that he called the turn with. I think that It's unlikely that he has a full house. I guess he could have 7-8, 8s full, jacks full, or 10s full. I guess he could have 2 9s for a straight as well. But I don't know how often he calls the turn with something like 2 9s or 2 10s. So I think his range is pretty well condensed to pocket queens or jack X suited type hand, and I think that he's liable to fold out on the river. It's really unlikely you have air in your range. If he's at all good at hand reading, he might actually give you credit here, and you might have got away with murder in this hand, playing it a little too aggressively and getting away with a big bluff on the river. This might be the one spot where I think you could get away with it. So if I played the hand this way and I got to the river with a bluff, I would go ahead and fire again and just try and win the pot. That being said, we decided to check, and our opponent now bets 285, which is pretty much the size of the pot. Daryl goes on to say that he was debating calling on the basis that his opponent could only be betting with a 9 or better, which means pretty much a full house at this point. So he decides to call here with 2 3s, which I think is extremely aggressive, and somehow he wins the pot when his opponent shows ace queen of hearts. I think that calling here is just too ambitious, man. While you might be right on the assumption that your opponent is only going to bet when he has a 9 or something like a full house, I just don't think that you could assume that he has anything less than that, because he wouldn't call the turn, especially with a player behind him, without a hand with a ton of equity. It's also really unlikely that he's turning a hand into a bluff on the river, but even if he is, you still don't beat those hands. If he's bluffing now with something like queen jack, you're still losing to that. So you really only beat an absolute stone cold bluff, which means he would have to have floated you on the turn with a crazy plan with something like ace king or ace queen, or king queen, and then planning on turning his hand into a bluff on the river when you check. I just don't see that happening that often. I see your opponent waking up with a monster here most of the time, something like a full house or a 9, and I just don't see you winning the hand often enough to call. So I think this is a spot where you have to separate the results from what's the best long-term play to make here against most opponents you're going to face. I understand you might have had a little bit of history with him, but even still, the math says to fold. There's just not enough hands in his range that he could call the turn with that are going to be bluffs that you're going to be ahead of. So I think that even though this is a spot where we're right, we really have to look objectively and hard and interrogate our game a lot to figure out, wait a minute, is the math lining up in my favor here, and am I going to be right enough, often enough, to justify calling here? So I encourage you to head over to my blog, alectorelli.com, after this video. I show you a math breakdown of all the hands I think that our opponent is likely to have, and I also show you my equity with 2 3s versus that entire range of hands our opponent could have, so you can see exactly what I'm talking about and see from a math standpoint, not just an intuition standpoint, but really from a mathematical standpoint, why I think this is a clear fold in the long run, and how you can use the same exercise that I use to study after the fact and improve your game as well. So I encourage you to check that out at my blog, alectorelli.com. Alright guys, that's it for this week. I definitely encourage you to stay tuned to my YouTube channel. I will be putting out the best Hello Alec series video, the best hand, every week, and I'll be selecting it to feature right here on my Hand of the Day channel. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you guys next week. Cheers.
Hand of the Day.